lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother. It is my view that the deceitful way the interview was obtained substantially influenced what my mother said. The interview was a major contribution to making my parents' relationship worse and has since hurt countless others.
A wave of sadness has swept through the United Kingdom as Prince William faces one of the most heartbreaking moments of his life. The future king, known for his composure and strength, has been visibly shaken after the palace confirmed deeply emotional news that no one saw coming. Behind the royal smiles and public duties, a devastating reality has unfolded, one that touches both his heart and the nation's. What could have possibly brought such sorrow to William's world? Today, we uncover the emotional truth. The silence before the storm. The morning light spilled softly over Windsor Castle, brushing its ancient stones with warmth and calm. Prince William stepped into the gardens, the weight of his world momentarily lifted. The air was cool, the scent of roses lingered, and birds darted through the quiet sky. For the first time in days, his heart felt steady. "This is how life should feel," he murmured, his voice barely louder than the breeze. These morning walks had become his sanctuary. A fragile escape from the endless demands of duty. As heir to the throne, William's days were ruled by responsibility and restraint. Yet beneath the formality, he was a husband, a father, a man who found joy in the simplest things, kicking a football with his children, sharing quiet tea with Kate by the window, or laughing together when the world wasn't watching. "The world outside may demand perfection," he once told a confidant, "but here, I just want peace." For a while, peace seemed to have found him. But behind the stillness, something was shifting, quiet, slow, and unsettling. The rhythm of palace life began to falter. Doors closed faster at night. Conversation stopped when footsteps approached. Even the familiar faces that usually smiled now looked away too quickly. The air carried a strange heaviness, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. "Something is wrong," whispered one aide to another. "Something we haven't been told yet." It began with a phone call. A single, piercing ring in the dark hours before dawn. A trusted aide answered. Within moments, the color drained from her face. The message was brief, but its impact was profound. Without a word, she rushed through the corridors, her footsteps echoing against the marble floors. By sunrise, the castle had changed. Doors that once stood open were locked. Curtains were drawn. Guards stood tense at their posts. From the outside, Windsor still looked serene, but inside, unease was spreading like smoke. Soon, quiet movements linked Kensington Palace, Buckingham Palace, and even Balmoral. Couriers came and went at odd hours, clutching sealed envelopes stamped with the royal crest. Advisors were summoned for meetings that stretched late into the night. "This isn't routine," said an insider. "Something serious has reached the very top." William felt it before anyone told him. His aides avoided eye contact. His father's staff spoke in cautious tones. Even Kate could sense it, that unspoken dread hovering in every room. "What's going on?" William asked one morning, his voice steady but searching. The silence that followed was its own answer. That night, he stood by the window, staring out into the stillness of Windsor. The lights flickered faintly across the castle grounds. He thought of his mother, of the pain he had survived, of the strength he had built from loss. "I thought I'd seen the worst," he whispered. But deep down, he knew something was coming. Something that would shatter the fragile peace he had fought so hard to keep. But what could possibly be powerful enough to break the silence of Windsor that night and drag Prince William back into the storm? Keep watching. The call that shattered the night. The corridors of Windsor were silent, the kind of stillness that feels almost sacred or ominous. A single clock ticked on the wall, marking the passing seconds of an ordinary night that was about to change everything. Prince William sat alone at his desk, the soft glow of a golden lamp spilling across scattered papers. He had been finishing the last of his duties, ready to rest after another long day. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window pane, and for a moment, peace seemed to linger in the air, fragile, quiet, and complete. But peace, in the royal world, never lasts long. The phone rang, sharp, insistent, cutting through the stillness like a blade. Once, twice, then again. William looked at the clock. It was long past midnight. No one called at this hour unless something was terribly wrong. He hesitated, the sound echoing in the room, before finally picking up. "This is William," he said softly, his voice calm but tired. For a moment, there was only silence on the other end. Then came a voice, trembling, hesitant and unmistakably broken. "Your Royal Highness, there's been an incident." The words hung heavy in the air. William's heart tightened. His grip on the phone turned rigid. "What kind of incident?" he asked. The pause that followed felt endless, a silence so thick it made the rain outside sound distant. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, came the truth. Clear, unforgiving, final. His world stopped. William's chest tightened as the room seemed to shrink around him. The weight of those few words crushed everything in their path. He stared into the distance, his pulse pounding in his ears. "No," he whispered, his voice cracking, "that can't be true. Please, tell me that isn't true." But the voice on the line was steady now, sorrowful, but certain. There was no mistake. The news was real. Something, or someone, irreplaceable was gone. In that moment, Prince William was not the future king, not the face of duty or composure. He was simply a man, heartbroken, lost, struggling to breathe through the shock. Tears welled in his eyes, but none fell. He sat motionless, his hand pressed to his face, as the silence wrapped around him like a shroud. "How did it happen?" he managed to whisper at last. Each word of the reply struck him deeper. Then, almost instantly, Windsor awoke. Lights flickered on in distant corridors. Footsteps hurried through the halls. Phones rang behind closed doors. Senior aides were summoned, guards took new positions, and urgent whispers spread through the night. The palace sealed itself from the world. Communications restricted, calls intercepted, messages silenced. Windsor had become a fortress of grief. Kate arrived moments later, her face pale, her eyes wide with dread. One look at William told her everything. She didn't ask a single question. She simply crossed the room, laid her hand on his shoulder, and sat beside him. No words passed between them. They didn't need any. The truth had already spoken louder than anything they could say. Outside, the rain grew heavier, running down the ancient stone walls like tears from the sky. Inside, the palace breathed in whispers, aides moving carefully, faces pale with shock. As dawn crept in, the first light touched William's face. He stood at the window staring at his reflection. No longer the confident heir the world admired, but a man hollowed by loss. The thoughts circled endlessly in his mind, haunting and cold. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. And as morning broke over Windsor, the silence that filled its halls was not just quiet. It was grief itself, echoing through every corner of the castle that had just lost its peace forever. And now, as Windsor wakes under a sky heavy with sorrow, one haunting question lingers. What truth could shatter a prince so completely? Stay tuned. Echoes of the past. The morning light crept softly into the room, washing the walls in a pale, almost sorrowful glow. Prince William sat by the window, unmoving, his thoughts drifting endlessly between the past and the unbearable present. The news from the night before still played in his mind like a broken record, each word cutting deeper than the last. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the same ache returned. that hollow, suffocating kind of pain that words could never mend. He had once believed that time would heal everything, but now, in the quiet of Windsor, he saw the truth. Time didn't heal. It only taught you how to hide the hurt. His eyes fell upon the gardens beyond the glass, the same gardens he once ran through as a child, hand in hand with his mother. He could still hear her laughter echoing faintly through memory, bright, warm, full of life. "Look at the flowers, darling. Aren't they beautiful?" she had said, kneeling beside him among the roses. He had been too young to understand the world, but old enough to feel her love. Now those same roses bloomed again, yet the woman who once admired them was gone. The thought tore through him like it always had, sudden, sharp, merciless. He closed his eyes and saw that night in Paris, the night that had shattered everything, the whispers in the corridor, his father's voice, pale and heavy, breaking the news that no child should ever hear. Diana, Princess of Wales, has been killed in a car accident. The world around him had blurred, the air had vanished, and the boy he once was, carefree and smiling, disappeared with her. Why her? He had asked, in a trembling voice. No one had an answer then, and no one had one now. Through the years, that pain never left him. It lingered quietly beneath every smile, every public appearance, every headline that demanded strength. The anniversaries, the tributes, the endless speculation. They were all reminders of the woman he lost, and the life that was stolen from them both. He had learned to play the part the world demanded, calm, steady, composed. But beneath that polished surface lived a son who never stopped grieving. His thoughts drifted to his brother, Harry, the only other person who truly understood that loss. He remembered that day, the two of them walking behind their mother's coffin, the world watching in silence. They had promised each other they would never drift apart. "We only have each other now," Harry had said. For a long time, that was true. But as the years passed, something had broken between them, not just in words, but in trust. The shouting, the accusations, the hurt that neither could undo. "You've changed," Harry once said. "No," William had replied quietly. "I've had to." Now standing in the aftermath of another tragedy, that old ache returned, raw and familiar. It felt as though fate was forcing him to relive his deepest wound, to face the same emptiness once more. As he walked through the long corridor lined with portraits, his eyes found one. His mother painted in soft tones, her eyes gentle and kind. "I tried, Mum," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I really tried." The air around him felt still, as though the castle itself was listening. He thought about her lessons, compassion, courage, grace, and how they now felt like both blessings and burdens. He remembered the cameras, the headlines, the loneliness of being watched but never seen. He had built a life, a family, a legacy, yet the pain had never truly left. It simply waited for moments like this to rise again, reminding him that grief doesn't disappear. It transforms. Hours passed before Kate entered the room. She didn't speak at first. She didn't need to. "You're thinking of her," she said gently. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the gray horizon. "It feels like she's here again," he murmured. "Like she's walking these halls, reminding me that love never really leaves. It just changes form." Outside, the wind stirred the rain-soaked air, carrying the scent of earth and memory. As William's reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, he saw both the boy who lost his mother and the man burdened by the crown. The pain of yesterday had returned, not to destroy him, but to remind him that even kings are human, and that some wounds never close. They simply live on, as love's quiet echo in the heart. But as the storm whispered against Windsor's walls, one question lingered. What truth could shake a crown built on centuries of silence? Stay with us. The night. The crown trembled. The study at Windsor Castle was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock, a sound that now felt unbearably loud. Prince William sat at his desk, staring at a sealed folder that had just been delivered by a senior aide who couldn't quite meet his eyes. The folder's weight seemed to press down on him, heavy with truths that could alter lives. His hand trembled slightly as he broke the seal. Across the room, Kate stood near the window, her arms folded, her face pale but composed. "You don't have to face this alone," she whispered. But both knew the truth. Some burdens were his alone to carry. He opened the folder. Line after line, the words carved themselves into his chest. Each sentence felt like a blow. The air seemed to thin. By the time he reached the final page, his heart had gone cold. What he had feared most had been confirmed. Someone close to him, someone he trusted completely, had betrayed the royal family in a way that could never be undone. This wasn't about politics or scandal. It was personal, devastatingly personal. William leaned back in his chair, staring blankly ahead. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. But denial couldn't rewrite what was written. The proof was there, undeniable, irreversible. Kate stepped closer, her voice soft but urgent. "What does it say?" He met her gaze, his eyes clouded with pain. "It's the end of something sacred," he said quietly. The room seemed to shrink around them. Even the air felt heavy, as though the old castle itself understood the gravity of what had been lost. Within minutes, whispers turned into movement. Doors were locked. Senior advisors were called in, their faces grave as they gathered in the same study. William placed the documents on the table. No one spoke at first. They simply read in stunned silence. One by one, their expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally, sorrow. "It's true," William said, his voice low and steady. "There's no mistake." A long silence followed. "What do we do now?" an advisor finally asked. William drew a slow breath. "We protect what's left," he replied. "The truth stays here. The world is not ready." As the hours dragged on, the pain refused to fade. Memories of laughter and loyalty now felt hollow. William thought of his children and how one day they might learn that even love and loyalty could be shattered, that being royal did not shield one from heartbreak. When dusk settled, he stepped outside into the gardens. The air was cool, the ground damp from morning rain. He stopped beneath the old oak tree his mother had loved and whispered, "It's happening again." In that quiet, he could almost hear her voice, gentle, steadfast, reminding him that true strength wasn't silence, but endurance. By nightfall, Windsor's windows glowed softly against the dark sky. Inside, the family spoke in hushed tones, while beyond the palace gates, reporters waited in the rain, sensing that something had cracked behind those walls. Back in his study, William ran his hand over the letter one last time before locking it away. As midnight struck, he gazed through the window at the cold, distant stars. The burden was his alone now, the secret, the sorrow, the duty to protect what remained. And though the world outside slept, unaware, something within those ancient walls had changed forever. And what truth could be so devastating that even a future king must guard it in silence? The answer hides behind Windsor's glowing gates. Echoes behind the golden gates. By sunrise, the whispers had already begun. Something had gone terribly wrong behind those golden gates, and though no one dared say it aloud, fear had settled like fog over Windsor. Courtiers moved quickly through the corridors, their faces pale, their voices low. "No statement yet," one aide muttered. "We wait for the prince's instruction." But even they knew silence could not hold back the tide forever. The truth was too heavy, and the world was already asking questions. Outside, reporters gathered like vultures in the rain. Flashing lights pierced the mist. Microphones jutted forward. Urgent voices filled the air, desperate for a soundbite. The press could smell a crisis, not just a scandal, but a royal reckoning. Every passing hour brought new headlines, each one more sensational than the last. Shock at the palace. Prince William faces the unthinkable. The frenzy had begun, wild and unstoppable. Inside, the atmosphere grew heavier with each minute. Advisors rushed in and out of rooms, clutching folders, whispering over phones, their faces drawn with exhaustion. In one private corner, a handful of officials debated over every word of a potential statement. "We must calm the public," one insisted, "but we cannot reveal too much." Yet every phrase felt like walking on glass. One wrong word could ignite another inferno. The fate of the monarchy seemed to rest on a handful of carefully measured sentences. At the center of it all sat Prince William, silent at the long table. His expression was calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm within. "They'll twist every word," he murmured, almost to himself. "They always do?" Across from him, Kate watched with quiet strength. She wanted to reach out, to tell him he wasn't alone, but she knew. There were moments when even love could not carry the weight of duty. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we face it together." Beyond those gilded gates, the palace still gleamed under the morning sun, solid, eternal, unshaken. But inside, laughter had vanished, replaced by whispers and dread. Every knock on a door, every hurried step, echoed like an omen. Courtiers exchanged nervous glances. "It's spreading too fast," one aide warned. "We can't contain it." Rumors flew like startled birds, some true, most imagined, each one chipping away at the carefully guarded image of royal perfection. When the time came, William stood before the mirror, straightening his tie, forcing composure into his reflection. "Hold steady," he whispered. "The nation needs calm." Moments later, the official spokesperson stepped before the press. "The royal household acknowledges the recent developments," he said carefully. "We ask for understanding and privacy." A few simple words, but each carried the weight of everything unsaid. As night fell, the palace glowed against the dark sky, serene in appearance but fractured within. Kate stood by the window beside her husband, the flash of cameras lighting the courtyard below. "They won't rest until they know," she murmured. "And even then, they'll want more." William nodded, his voice low. "Truth isn't news. Pain is." By midnight, the halls had quieted, advisors gone. Only the hum of distant radios remained. William sat alone, staring out at the rain-soaked gates, the city lights blurred beyond them. "How do you lead a nation," he whispered, "when you can't even hold your own home together?" Kate entered softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "You just have to be human." He turned to her, a faint, weary smile touching his lips. "Then, let them see that," he said quietly. "Let them see the man, not the mask." And as the rain fell harder, Windsor stood glowing against the night, magnificent, untouchable to the world outside, yet breaking quietly from within. So as the palace glimmers against the storm, one haunting question remains. What truth hides behind the royal mask of strength? Stay glued. Shadows beneath the crown. The golden halls of the palace, once symbols of majesty and tradition, now felt like closing walls pressing in on Prince William. Every sound seemed sharper, every whisper lingered longer. Nights brought no peace. Only the endless ticking of the clock and the weight of thoughts that refused to fade. Lying awake, he often stared at the ceiling, the silence louder than thunder. The crown feels heavier than ever, he thought. With every sunrise, duty returned. Meetings filled with expectant faces, advisors reminding him of what must be said and what must never be revealed. He nodded quietly through it all, his expression calm, his voice measured. But behind that composure, the storm raged on. "A king cannot crumble," he whispered to his reflection one morning. But what if he already is? Family gatherings offered little comfort. Conversations were soft, careful, almost rehearsed. Even the children sensed something had changed. "Why does Daddy look sad?" little Charlotte once asked. Kate managed a feigned smile. "Because even heroes need time to think," she replied gently. But she knew. His silence was growing heavier. William carried the burden alone, much like his father once had. He often recalled how King Charles had masked his grief after Princess Diana's death, turning pain into duty. Now, standing in the same halls years later, William wondered if history was quietly repeating itself. He wore the crown like armor, William thought, and maybe I must, too. He found solace in the palace gardens where the wind whispered through ancient trees, carrying the echoes of his mother's laughter. "Can a man who feels deeply still lead with strength?" he murmured one evening, gazing at her favorite flowers. "The crown demands more than a heart can give. But without the heart, what's left?" Inside the palace, meetings dragged into the night. Courtiers spoke in polished tones about stability and perception. "The public must see control," one insisted. "They cannot sense weakness." William listened quietly, his fingers interlocked. When the room finally fell silent, he said softly, "Strength isn't silence. It's standing, even when you're breaking inside." His words hung in the air like truth too raw to answer. In the days that followed, his warmth faded into quiet restraint. He ate little, slept less. "He's not himself," whispered an aide. "He's lost in something he can't share." Yet through it all, Kate remained beside him, her silence gentle, her presence grounding. On sleepless nights, she found him by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "You can't carry the world, Will," she'd whisper. "You're only human." He turned to her with tired eyes. "That's the problem," he said. "The world doesn't want a human king. They want a symbol. But symbols feel pain too. And as the days blurred into weeks, every smile, every wave to the crowds became an act of quiet endurance. A prince learning to lead while carrying the invisible weight of 1,000 expectations. So what do you think? Has Prince William finally reached the breaking point where duty and emotion collide? Or is this the moment he transforms into the king destiny demands? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.